When you think of chocolate, you probably imagine sweetness, but behind that sweetness lies a story of hard work, struggle and survival. Welcome to our documentary on the cocoa industry in Ghana.
Do you ever think about where all our chocolate comes from? Well, behind every bar of chocolate lies a story that began over a century ago in the cocoa farms of Ghana. The history of Ghana's cocoa industry is deeply tied to its colonial past and its social and economic transformation over time. Cocoa was first introduced to the Gold Coast, which is now known as Ghana, in the late 19th century. Around the 1870s, a Ghanaian blacksmith brought cocoa seeds from Fernando Po, an island off the coast of Equatorial Guinea, and he planted them in his hometown of Mampong. And this small act would eventually change the country's entire economy. By the early 1900s, cocoa production had spread rapidly across the southern forest regions of Ghana. Local farmers adopted cocoa as a cash crop because it required relatively low startup cost and could be grown on family farms. However, as cocoa became the backbone of the colonial economy, it also created new inequalities. British colonial authorities and foreign trading companies controlled the export and the pricing of cocoa, while Ghanaian farmers did most of the hard labor for minimal profit. By the 1930s, Ghana had become the world's largest producer of cocoa, a title it held for decades. The history not only shaped Ghana's economic identity, but it also influenced migration, land ownership, and social class structures, as rural workers moved to cocoa-growing areas in search of better opportunities. After independence, in 1957, the Ghanaian government tried to nationalize and regulate the cocoa trade through the establishment of the Cocoa Marketing Board. Despite periods of decline due to the falling global prices and aging trees, cocoa has remained central to Ghana's economy and national identity. Even today, it employs millions of small-scale farmers and it continues to reflect the country's ongoing struggles with globalization, fair trade, and development. The story of cocoa in Ghana is therefore not just about agriculture, it's a story of labor, colonial legacies, and the resilience of local communities that built one of the world's most important industries from the ground up.
Have you ever seen people that are working in chocolate in horrible conditions? A handful of organizations and journalists have exposed the widespread use of child labor and in some cases slavery on cocoa farms. Child labor has been found on cocoa farms in Ghana and many other different countries worldwide. If you walk by a chocolate store, you never say, "Oh, child labor." It is soaked in misery, violence, and suffering. For over a century, Ghana has been one of the world's leading producers of cocoa, the raw ingredient behind chocolate. But beneath the sweet surface of this global commodity lies a bitter truth. In the lush cocoa growing regions of Ghana, thousands of children wake before dawn, not to attend school, but to work in the fields. They wield machetes, carry heavy loads, and spray toxic pesticides, often without protective gear. These are not isolated cases. This is a system. Child labor in Ghana's cocoa industry is not just a relic of the past. It's a persistent reality. Despite international pledges and national laws, nearly half of children in cocoa farming households are engaged in labor, and many face hazardous conditions. Poverty drives this cycle. Most cocoa farmers earn less than $1 per day, making child labor a survival strategy. Education, while valued, is often out of reach. Schools are distant, unfunded, or unaffordable. Instead of going to school, they are learning that sharp blades cut deep and big corporations make big promises they seldom keep.
Toiling away on her family farm, her life since she was 5 years old. School's a luxury she's hardly ever been.
I feel sad. I want to be a medical doctor, but they don't have money to support me.
The family says it harvested only one bag of decent quality cocoa the entire year. A 140-pound sack fetches around $115.
The Ghanaian government has taken legislative steps to address this crisis. The Children's Act of 1998, Act 560, sets the minimum age for employment at 15 and prohibits hazardous work for anyone under 18. It guarantees children the right to education and protection from exploitation. Yet, enforcement remains patchy, especially in rural areas where poverty and tradition often override legal protections. International and local NGOs have stepped in to fill the gap. The International Cocoa Initiative has trained farmers, built schools, and developed child protection committees in cocoa communities. In 2024, Ghana launched the Ghana Accelerated Action Plan Against Child Labor, partnering with ICI, UNICEF, and the World Bank to tackle child labor through coordinated policy and grassroots actions. More recently, the Global Media Foundation introduced the Rights for Cocoa project in 2025, targeting 1,000 vulnerable children in the northern regions. Funded by Canada's UNIFOR Social Justice Fund, the initiative blends education, community engagement, and economic support to break the cycle of exploitation. These efforts offer hope, but the road ahead is long. As global chocolate companies continue to profit, the question remains, will the world demand ethical cocoa, or will children continue to pay the price?
2 sociological labor issues in the cocoa industry in Ghana.
Child labor and social stratification can be described as a sociological issue affecting Ghana's cocoa industry. It reflects a broader pattern of social and economic stratification within rural communities. Families often depend on their children to help on cocoa farms due to poverty, lack of access to education, and weak social support systems. Industrialization in developed countries has created a global demand for cheap cocoa, pressuring non-industrialized nations like Ghana to reduce production costs. As a result, cocoa farming frequently relies on informal, family-based labor that includes children. The International Cocoa Initiative, ICI, reports that approximately 1.56 million children are involved in cocoa-related labor, representing nearly 45% of children living in cocoa-growing households. Many of these children perform hazardous tasks, such as carrying heavy loads and using machetes, which affect their education and well-being. From a sociological perspective, child labor in the cocoa sector is simply not a moral issue, but a structural one, shaped by global economic inequalities and historical patterns of industrial exploitation. Marxist theory helps us to understand how industrial capitalism in developed nations profit from cheap labor in developing regions, perpetuating class inequality across borders. Poverty and unequal access to education has reproduced social hierarchies, limiting opportunities for social mobility and maintaining Ghana's dependence on low-wage agricultural labor. This is a sociological issue because it explores how social inequality, class, and structural poverty shape the lives of children and their families. It shows that child labor is not the result of personal failure, but of systemic forces such as global capitalism, educational inequalities, and industrial independence. Another major sociological issue in Ghana cocoa industry is a structural economic inequality created by global trade and industrial systems. Despite being one of the world's leading cocoa producers, Ghanaian farmers earn very little from the international chocolate market, while multinational corporations in industrialized nations gain the majority of profits. This imbalance reflects a dependency relationship where Ghana remains reliant on exporting raw materials rather than developing local manufacturing industries. Historically, industrialization in the global north expanded manufacturing and processing, while agricultural nations like Ghana were left to supply cheap raw materials. This unexpected exchange has created what sociologists describe as an industrial divide, a structural gap between industrial and agricultural economies. From a dependency theory perspective, this global system allows core nations to maintain economic domination over perpetual ones. Sociologically, this issue highlights how global capitalism and colonial legacies continue to shape social and economic hierarchies, trapping Ghanaian cocoa farmers in a cycle of poverty and dependency. Without significant local industrialization, such as processing plants and fair trade systems, Ghana's economy remains vulnerable to fluctuating global prices and market control. According to World Bank in 2023, smallholder cocoa farmers in Ghana typically earn less than US $1.20 per day, placing many below the international poverty line. This is a sociological issue because it examines how social structures and global power relations, rather than individual choices, determine economic outcomes. It connects Ghana's economic struggle to larger systems of inequality, capitalism, and historical dependencies by creating industrialization. By analyzing these social patterns, sociology helps to explain why inequality persists and how it is reproduced through global economic systems.
Now, we are going to apply the functionalist perspective coined by Emile Durkheim to understand the cocoa industry in Ghana. From a functionalist point of view, the cocoa industry contributes to the stability and functioning of the Ghanaian society by providing employment, foreign exchange, and rural livelihoods. Cocoa farming supports millions of smallholder farms and it sustains family and community life in rural Ghana. The Ghana Cocoa Board acts as a stabilizing institution that regulates prices and ensures export quality, which helps to maintain both social and economic order. According to an article written and published by the Deputy Regional Manager of Ghana's Cocoa Board, Felix Kwenu, 2024, cocoa, scientifically known as Theobroma cacao, is one of the important cash crops cultivated in Ghana. The crop has widely been described as the mainstay of Ghana's economy in view of its continuous contribution to strengthening Ghana's gross foreign exchange reserves. For instance, in 2021 alone, cocoa contributed about 3.1 billion Ghana dollars to the country's gross domestic product, accounting for over 10% of the country's GDP. Even though the agricultural sector is the largest employer of Ghanaians, the cocoa subsector alone employs over 1 million farmers. In addition, Ghana's cocoa sector is advertised for supporting the livelihoods of millions of people in the commerce, services, and industrial sectors of the economy, and thus making the cocoa industry a pillar of Ghana's economic development drive.
Durkheim focuses on social cohesion and how societies stay together, which he believed was necessary and important for society in order for it to function as a whole and maintain both order and stability. Furthermore, Durkheim saw the organic solidarity so necessary for a healthy society being threatened by laissez-faire economics and a utilitarian philosophy which encouraged an egoism, strongly contrasting with the kind of individualism which could exist in industrialized societies. According to the text Sociology, Work and Organization by Tony J. Watson,
A healthy individualism could exist as long as that society provided regulation, directing principles or norms. Organic solidarity is social cohesion that arises from the specialized division of labor in modern, complex societies. In this system, people depend on one for their specialized skills and services. The concept of interdependence creates a mutual reliance, as no single person can be self-sufficient. Within the cocoa industry, countries and economies are interconnected through trade, labor, and resources. For example, in the cocoa industry in Ghana, farmers, the state, and international chocolate companies depend on each other, all of which are vital to the success and growth of the industry, which then leads to an orderly and sustainable society as everyone works together.
Ghana's cocoa industry stands as the heartbeat of its economy, built on the dedication and resilience of farmers whose hard work sweetens the world, yet often leaves their own lives untouched by the wealth they help create. From child labor to economic inequality, the challenges faced by these farmers remind us that global development is not just an economic issue, but a deeply sociological one, shaped by systems of power, dependency, and exploitation. Still, amid the struggles, there is hope. Through fair trade, education, and global awareness, Ghana's cocoa farmers continue to push for a more just and sustainable future. Together, we must remember that behind every bar of chocolate lies a story of endurance, humanity, and the ongoing fight for equality, and only when that story changes will true development be achieved.